So we are going to call this meeting to order. This is the Finance and Revenue Committee meeting on June 8th. Again, at 6 p.m. Myself, Nick Allen, Bernie Flynn, and Brian McGinnis. Item number 2 is comments, suggestions, petitions by residents in attendance regarding items not on the agenda. Seeing none, we will move on to item 3A, which is our May 2022 financials.
Good evening. We could start on page 1, please. So looking at the May 22 cash balance report, we started the month of May with $18,999,218 in cash. We brought in or transferred between accounts $7,143,404. We spent or transferred between accounts $6,975,409. This left us with a cash balance of $19,167,213. Of this amount, $10,271,549 is restricted cash, and $8,895,664 is for operating purposes. Moving over to page 2, the interfund activity. Last month, we reported a balance of interfund activity between accounts of $11,028,679. If we scroll to the bottom, we see the balance at May 31st is $10,306,088. So we have made a decrease in these due tos of about $722,000. Moving over to page 3, the transfer schedule. Not that you can see it here, but if you count line by line, lines 6 and 7, you will see that $1 million was transferred from the general fund into the capital operating reserve to take care of the temporary loan for real estate taxes that was made at the beginning of the year. Moving over to page 4, the budget to actual summary by department. Actual revenues for the year ended May 31st were $18,331,399. This was offset by actual expense of $12,139,360. This left us in a positive position for the year end of $6,192,040, and of that amount, $4,623,626 relates to the general fund. Moving to the rest of the report, at this point in time, we're able to kind of get a better prediction of where we're going to land the year at. If you were to look through these pages, through pages 5 through 25, you'll see that there's the last column says % of budget remaining. At this point in time, we would expect expense line items to be about 60%. Any line items that fall below that threshold could be considered potential problems and that we need to keep a close eye on. So looking at the general fund revenues in the administration. Jeff, if you could just scroll down to the next page, please. Both EIT and real estate taxes are coming in very strong. They're meeting budget expectations at this point in time. The one line item that we're seeing that is not quite meeting where it needs to be is deed transfer tax. We had a budget of $850,000, and through May 31st, we're at about $223,000. So this line item, while it's trailing now, we still have 7 months left in the year, so there's still hope that, we can make that budget number. I can say that in our department, we still see a lot of sewer and stream protection certifications. So that tells me, homes are still selling. At this point, it's just not quite where we expected it to be. Looking at the expense side on the administration fund, legal other is over budget by $12,000 and is expected to increase as the year goes through. Fuel expense across the board for all departments. Every department is almost at their budget for 2022 at this point in time. So we do need to kind of take a look at across the board expense line items where we could see some potential savings and other things, or where we could shift some of those costs. Boards and commissions, this line item is running close to budget, but the big thing that was paid out this year was the railroad study, but we will be getting a grant reimbursement for that. Looking over to the other departments within the general fund, mainly police and building and housing, while their revenues are trailing slightly behind budget at this point in time, they are doing a good job with expenses, and they are being managed and are meeting budgeted expectations. Recreation, we do expect both the revenues and expenses to pick up as the summer comes in and events start. Looking at the fire fund, utilities at this point are over budget by $15,000. Again, this is a line item we need to take a look at, see if there's any other potential savings or if we can shift some of those costs into the general fund. The next big fund is the sewer fund. As I've been saying all along, revenues are not quite meeting where we needed them to be at this point in time. Our current year revenues are $2,015,998. If we were to take the budget and divide it by 12 and multiply by 5, we would expect to be at about $2.6 million. So we're trailing a bit in revenues. Why did this happen? There were some assumptions that we put into the budget in the beginning of the year, mainly for some remediation of the water being discharged at the Davis property. The amount that we put extra into the budget for that, assuming that that would all start on January 1st, was about $153,000. We did have an increase in our sewer tap revenue. If you look at what was in the budget last year versus this year, we did increase that line item by $195,000. Year to date, we've only received $2,332. Sure that there will be more fees coming in, but again, another line item that's kind of trailing at this point. And the outside hauling income, when the trucks come in and they take the wastewater out from the departments, that line item was also increased by $55,000. So if you add up those three big variances, you come up with about $403,000, which is part of it, and also the receivables. The balance on our aqua receivables as of April 30th, there's about $728,000 in revenues outstanding. If you look at this amount at the same time last year, we were at $629. So there's almost a $100,000 increase in sewer account balances that are outstanding. What have we done to remediate this? We have sent the April 30th sewer account balances to Portnoy. We have requested that accounts over 60 days be looked at, and any accounts that are not already in collections, they will start that process. We have also temporarily halted the transfer from sewer fund to general fund, that's a temporary fix at this point in time until we can get the cash flow back to what it needs to be. But on the other hand, if some of these things that we're working on now, we have to remember that the general fund does depend on the sewer fund for that transfer. So we also do have a meeting scheduled with the wastewater superintendents to kind of go line by line and see if there's any line items that we could potentially halt some spending on, or any shifts of things that we do. And of course, our department will continue to monitor the collections process and make sure that we're following up on all of that. Moving over to the parking fund, at this point in time through May 31st, parking is operating at a net loss of $40,000. This is mainly in parking tickets and lot revenue. Those two line items are trailing budget, but expenses are within expectations. Again, we will continue to monitor that fund as well. The capital expense line item, as I talked about in previous months, will appear as though it is over budget in parking, but this is because some line items that were not completed in 2021 and were not accounted for in the 2022 budget are in here, but there was sufficient cash at year-end 2021 to pay for those. Moving over to the liquid fuels fund, we had $651,000 budgeted for the paving project and other non-paving expenses. Last month, we had the contract that was approved for $832,000. We did end the year 2021 with a positive cash balance of $953,000. So there is sufficient money to cover the paving project, but we will be operating relatively lean in cash in that line item. We only receive our allocation from the state once a year. We typically receive that at the beginning of April. So we have about 11 months to really, hit home on making sure that we're operating within our means on that fund. And then Mr. Flynn had mentioned last month about the capital projects. I will be providing, along with Will, a 6-month capital expense reconciliation to just show the projects that we have on hand that are in process for 2022, where they stand, what money has been spent, and if those projects are likely to, are we going to finish them, and where we're going to end, where we're looking to end. Any questions?
Mr. McGinnis, any questions?
Yes, thank you for the presentation. So let's just say if everything ended today and the way the current market is and with the pension fund, how much would we have to pay into the pension fund? Do we have any estimate of that yet?
So,
Referring to the minimum municipal obligation for the, okay, thank you.
so we had an MMO for both plans of about $2.1 million. We have made a transfer to the non-uniform MMO of about $154,000. And then on the police side, we made about a $200,000 transfer. So about at this point in time, we owe about $2 million for the MMO.
As if if the current market ended today, because that's what we would owe out of the general fund then, an additional 3 million. So essentially, then we only have only 3 million then, if we have 6 million restricted.
We have 10 million restricted, so it would be about 7. Yeah.
Barbara, I get only 2 questions. From and to, the second page that you were on, down the bottom, there were 2 very large numbers. One for $1 million, 999,000. The other one was 1.127. Can you tell me, what those, there are 2, actually there's 3 there for another million for line 09 and then line 11 and line 30. There seem to be pretty big payments. Do you know what they are?
So again, these are balances that have sort of, rolled over from year to year. Those mainly relate back to when the bond issue was first issued back in 2016 for stream protection improvements. Those balances have just sort of, hung there, and that's kind of what we're trying to accomplish each month, is trying to transfer this money that has been owed between the funds. So we're working very hard to try to anything that we can do to kind of bring these balances down, but it's mainly those 2 and then the due to sewer and the due to parking that make up the $10 million.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Awesome, thanks. I don't have any questions this month. Thanks very much. Any public questions or comments? Okay, great. Seeing none, we're good to head on to our action items, and we'll move on to item 4A, which is to approve the sewer tap fee study and direct the borough solicitor to draft an ordinance to enact change of sewer tap fees.
And this evening we have Mr. Dave Bush from Keystone Alliance, correct? he prepared the sewer tap fee study, can walk you through the basics, the methodology, and why we've arrived at the fee. And the fee, proposed new fee is substantially, well, more than twice what we currently have on our books. If you remember the number Barbara was talking about for sewer tap fee in the budget, $2,332 on the revenue. That's because we've had one equivalent dwelling unit added to the borough. That's one new connection.
Okay, thanks very much. Yeah, go.
Good evening. Let me provide a quick little background, if I may. The sewer tap fee is regulated by state statute. This goes back to 1990, when it was originally passed under Act 203. Act 209, which basically made boroughs and other municipal entities follow the Municipal Authorities Act, okay, for things related to tapping fees. The act was, or the tapping fee legislation was then amended in 2003, and it was required that everyone update their tapping fee in 2005. That was done by the borough at that time, but has not been touched since. Okay, so there's not been any adjustments to the tapping fee, to my knowledge, since 2005, if I remember correctly. But the tapping fee is basically a buy-in contribution by new development to join into your system. Understand that the system has been here for many years. The existing customers have paid into the system through their user fees to help support the system and its growth. Okay. The whole idea is that new users are made whole or made equal to everyone else when they pay this tapping fee contribution. And typically what we like to see is that those funds are used for capital purposes, not for operating purposes. Because as you can see, currently this year you have one tapping fee was paid. Okay? So as growth goes up and down from year to year and cycles and different things happening in different communities, it's not necessarily a line item, a revenue line item that you can depend on being consistent. But that said, you are allowed to update your tapping fee at any time. That tapping fee calculation, as I said, is set by state statute in terms of how that calculation is done. What we calculate is the maximum allowable tapping fee. You are allowed to adopt that tapping fee at that level or at a number less than that. You just need to be consistently applying that tapping fee to all your customers. And it is calculated on a per EDU basis. So a single family residence would pay one EDU. A McDonald's or a restaurant or something like that would pay multiple EDUs. Okay. But it is on an EDU basis. So the number that we have calculated, the total tapping fee is $5,115.83, would be the maximum allowable fee. I can talk about any topic you want. Really.
As you go through there, like for example, we have a multi-unit building over on Market Street that's going to be coming online, plus the townhouses. So is it every apartment pays $5,000, or is it calculated based on a square footage or usage?
Again, those are independent. If I'm understanding, each one is a separate apartment. Okay. Each separate apartment would count as one EDU.
Okay, so it'd be $5,000
$5,000 per EDU.
per address. Okay.
Yeah, per address,
Yeah,
as you said.
okay.
Now, if they're common areas such as a clubhouse or something like that, that might be assigned separately, and it might be more than one EDU. It depends upon the estimated water usage for that property.
Now, is that fee paid prior to construction or when they actually tap into the street?
Don't know the procedure here in the borough. Usually it's before. For developers, it's upfront. Again, if a vacant lot were to come to you and say, we'd like to connect, they'd be told, you need to pay this fee before you can physically connect. With developers, usually sometimes it's well in advance of actual construction.
Okay, thank you.
And then a question I have is in 2005, did Borough Council in the borough opt to go up to that maximum number? Or did they opt to go
I
lower?
believe so, but I don't know that for sure.
Sure.
I was involved with the calculation at that time, but sorry, it's been a long time and
Yeah, it has.
look back to that.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Mr. McGinnis, any questions?
One more question about
Sure.
I'll defer by looking over to the fellow that was shaking his head like a bobble doll, Mr. Gore. The Milton Center, did they pay their tapping fees already at a lower, much lower rate than the one that we're going to think about? Okay, thank you. All right, thanks.
Great. So this is something that we would recommend to full council then, if it's an action item, is that correct?
We're recommending an action item to direct the borough solicitor to draft an ordinance change because the fee is in your ordinance. So we have to change the fee by ordinance. So you'd be adopting this study and directing the solicitor's office to do that. And then we'd probably have a hearing in August.
So would we have to have a number before the public hearing, or could the public hearing function as the time to choose the number?
I think if you're going to have the number in the ordinance, you have to decide what the number is before you direct the solicitor to prepare the ordinance. But you could, if it's just a number you're talking about, that can be done at the meeting when you schedule the hearing in July.
Okay, great. Then I have no issues with this. Okay, great. I appreciate the background. It was really, really helpful. Thank
My
you.
pleasure. If there's
Yeah.
any questions, follow up, please just let me know.
Perfect. Great. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, that'll be a 3-0. 4B is to approve a request to increase civil service commission expense by $10,000 for legal fees.
Yeah, it's pretty self-explanatory. They are incurring larger legal fees because they've had a hearing that has been continued and there's more work to be done on that hearing.
Any questions, thoughts? No? Okay, we'll call that 3-0 then. Sure. Item 4C is to approve the proposal from TPD to plan for the long-term closure of Gay Street. I have no issues with this. Any questions? We've talked about this a lot. Okay. All right.
Yeah, I just want to thank the people who are involved. Some of them are in this room, many are not, who help TPD and us scope this scope of work. Well, we did that a few weeks ago, I think. So thank you.
Yeah, and thank you for all your work as well. Excellent. So we'll call that 3-0. And then, wow, we're already on minutes. May 2020 minutes? Questions? Concerns? No? All right. Yeah, I know. My class starts soon, but any other business tonight? All righty. At 6:23, we will go ahead and adjourn the meeting. Thank you.